In this presentation, I report on year 2 of a research study conducted over a 6-month period in 2012. The research, which is funded by the Ontario Ministry of Research and Innovation's Early Researcher Award, examines how middle school students can engage with social justice issues through digital literacies. In the first year of the study, grades 6, 7, and 8 students investigated the impact of war on children around the world. In year 2, at this research site in Toronto, Ontario, grade 6 students explored Aboriginal rights to preserve their cultures, languages, customs, and knowledges because these are protected under the Canadian Constitution. The overarching research question for the 3-year project is, how can we use digital texts to critically engage learners to become socially and globally conscious of the plight of others in our world? Our research team, working with the participating teachers, collaborated to select a theme which tied into the social studies and language arts curricular goals of looking at current events in Indigenous issues. The research draws upon the work in the areas of new literacies, multiliteracies, digital literacies, and critical literacies. In particular, we focus on the notion that students need to be not just users of technology, but also critics and producers.
I think that the project was really strong. I think there were lots of chances for the students to learn. We had access to technological resources we wouldn't have had access to, so we learned about some of the new software as well as new websites. We were introduced to some new books, and so we were able to examine a difficult issue in a very good way, and I think the students learned a lot and we learned a lot.
We worked with 2 classes of grade 6 students with 37 students in each class, which is a very large number. So for a total of 74 students. And we used a combination of quantitative surveying and case study methodology. The data sources include our detailed field notes, the students' planning notes, sketches and conversations, interviews with the students and teachers, the digital text the students produced, and still images and video recordings of selected learning and authoring activities in the classroom. All of the students in this study were new Canadians. A large population of them were from Middle Eastern countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria. Many of these students have witnessed atrocities and suffered hardships that no child should ever have to experience. Their teachers felt that even though some of the topics we might explore might be difficult for 11 and 12-year-olds, particularly English language learners, they felt that they would be able to relate to the subject matter as they were also in the position of trying to hold on to their first languages and cultures.
The whole idea of the residential schools, the topic itself, I mean, we were fearful of how deep we should go with some of these things, especially with our community, with some of the immigrant backgrounds they have. They've seen a lot of atrocities. And they were probably the most mature I've seen them as a group about this topic. Like, they really asked very intelligent questions when we had, you know, Elder Cliff in and the 2 singers. Like, they got it, which was really neat.
I think the students really were motivated by the use of technology, so that was their hook. And then once they were hooked, they couldn't help but enjoy learning about a very difficult issue. It is a very difficult issue, but with the enjoyment factor, they were able to get, I think, a little more deeply into what's kind of a very difficult issue for 11 and 12-year-olds to understand, but they really got the unfairness aspect of residential schools and treatment of First Nations people this century.
In 2007, the UN General Assembly adopted the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There are over 370 million Indigenous peoples in Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe, and the Pacific, and many of them are among the most impoverished, marginalized, and frequently victimized people in the world. At the time we were planning the research activities, information about the housing crisis and general living conditions in Attawapiskat was all over the media. the teachers wanted to extend the traditional unit of study based on First Nations history and culture in grade 6 to include an examination of some of the current issues facing First Nations people today. And those include the impact of colonization, low levels of educational attainment and high unemployment rates, and extreme poverty in some areas, mental and physical health issues, substance abuse, incarceration rates, and family or community separation by specifically looking at the impact that residential schooling has had on Native communities. And also the loss of the traditional ways of life in terms of culture and language. We created some digital learning centers that would focus on some of these issues. The students worked in groups of 4 or 5, and they used MacBook laptops. We were also involved in a project called the Project of Hope. Students were required to complete all 7 centers, and each center addressed a major political, social, and/or economic issue in the Indigenous community, past or present. The students read a text or watched a video clip and then responded to the information by producing a piece of their own digital media. The topics for the digital literacy centers included the impact of colonization, the rights of the child, the residential school system, current issues with a focus on Attawapiskat, child poverty, particularly in Native communities, endangered Aboriginal languages, and Indigenous culture and the arts. And on the slide you can see some of the print text that we used. Students were asked to create digital tasks as a result of each of the digital literacy centers. They used Comic Life to create sequential art panels. They used Glogster to create multimodal posters and interactive posters. They used Wordle and Tagxedo to make word clouds. And they used Edmodo as a social networking tool to discuss and respond to each other's ideas about the texts. They also used the Read, Write, Think newspaper interactive to write a newspaper article. And they used the online Cree language interactive. The students also used Blabberize to synthesize information, including statistics they found on child poverty. Task 5, for example, I have an example of the students' work, an audio example.
Child poverty is getting bigger and bigger. Children don't get any food or water. Children have no clothes to wear and live in dumps looking for food left over. All of them are poor, don't have money or any jobs. We have to help these people.
One of their other tasks was to work on a Cree language website, and there's a short video clip here.
So I've got a few experts in Blabberize here, which is going to get a mark.
This is hard.
C1.
C1.
Pip1.
An important component of the research project is involving community. We invited 2 award-winning First Nations musicians into the classroom to share their music and experience growing up on a reservation in Manitoba. And those musicians were Tracy Bone and J.C. Campbell.
No longer ashamed to be me. Now I know who I am. I walk with my eyes to the ground, so I couldn't see the beauty in the people like me. Filled my cup, stood me up. Resilient
also had an elder, Cliff Standing Ready, who is a residential school survivor, come in to talk to the students about his experience in a residential school.
Yes, we're all connected. We're all connected. Doesn't matter where you were born, where you come from. We're all connected, sacred. So this is what happens. My experience in residential school, they took all that away from me. I did not know what it was like to have those kinds of teachings in my life. I didn't learn that until I ran away from that residential school and I connected with my grandfather, and my grandfather taught me all these different things. So this is what happened there. The residential school survivors, myself, and many of our residential school survivors are still surviving today. They estimate somewhere close to around 75,000 in Canada are still alive, and I'm one of them. And we still suffer that trauma. And what happens is that trauma affects everybody that has happened to be a residential school survivor. What happens is that affects your community. You may not sit in the school right now, but an elder will come in, a survivor, and talk to you. You are affected by that trauma. And that's not healthy. You will be forever changed because of that.
Students wrote poems from the perspective of a residential school survivor, either individually or as a group. After they had written their poems, they had the option to do one of the following. We brought in a musician, a local musician, to work with them with his guitar, and he helped them put their poem to music. Or they could use a combination of iMovie and GarageBand to create a video version of the poem and include images and their music. And here's an example of one of their poems. The students talked about wanting to share their poems with residential school survivors so that they would know that they were not alone and that others empathized with them. The students were also involved in the Project of Heart, which is a multi-school art project to commemorate the lives of the Aboriginal children who died as a result of the residential school system. Each participating student received one small tile to decorate, and each tile represents a child. An Aboriginal elder visited the school to perform a smudging ceremony where the tiles were blessed by the elder and the souls of the children represented by the tiles were lifted up to the sky.
About a month ago, these tiles that you guys had worked on, you guys that talk about these residential school kids, some of the kids that didn't survive, that's what we're doing today. We're commemorating those with those tiles. And what we do is I'm going to ask Chris or Brandon to come and smudge you. See, the significance of a smudge, it is a spiritual endeavor. What it does when you take a smudge, when Brandon smudges you, it takes all the negativity away from your life. And it gives you good feelings. So what will happen now, this is called a smudging ceremony.
In terms of the research findings, we found that students made gains in both the development of digital literacy skills and critical literacy. The teachers found that students were eager to use the technology to create their own digital texts, and that students who typically struggled with paper and pencil tasks excelled when using the technology.
There was one boy who he wasn't sort of getting through the centers, and he is somewhat more slow with tasks anyway. So I wasn't surprised by that. I was a little frustrated with him. I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. Like, you know, he's not getting his work done. But yeah, when I went over to look at, you know, he'd spent, I think, 5 or 6 days on one thing, I realized that he was so engaged with doing this amazing job and was having so much fun getting this task to be the absolute best that it didn't matter that he hadn't completed maybe some of the other tasks, because some of the kids were all about, okay, I want to have all the tasks completed. There's 7, I need 7 done. He was more engaged in getting at the depth within that activity, and that really showed me a different side to him.
One of the key findings was how students collaborated and shared their expertise. The teachers found that they were no longer the experts in the room. The inquiry-based approach proved to be very successful in terms of empowering the students and promoting independence.
The collaboration, I think, for some of them, because once someone figured out how to solve a problem or get something done, they became the experts in the room, and that's what I kept saying to them. I'm not going to be an expert in any one of these things. I'm here to oversee things, so you guys have to become the experts yourself. That was neat to see, and I'd say to, you know, you go and ask Omar because he knows how to do that. You go and ask Shifa, she knows how to do that. And they ran themselves, right? Without me having to be constantly on them. They knew how many more they had to do, which ones were done, who they could get help from. They became independent, which is really the goal. Like, we set up the learning challenges, the success criteria, then let them go. And they did it. They did it.
For many of the students, being able to access current information from their desks was the highlight of the project. The teachers found that the novelty of using laptops didn't last long, and the focus became the learning.
It's noticeable now that the technology in the room is a tool. It's not this thing that's housed over there and we only get it out a few times. And now if someone goes to get a laptop out and someone else is using an atlas, or someone else is using a book, or someone else is just talking to a partner working, it's not like everyone's crowding around like it's this special thing anymore. It's just a tool that we use. And then you can get on with learning when it's no longer that novelty. So absolutely. And I'm becoming much more comfortable. I'm now looking for ways. I go there first. How can I use them to introduce this lesson or this topic? Or what can they use that for to show me? Now I'm not looking for when we need to go to the library to do this. We just pull out the books, right? Pull out the laptops.
The teachers also noted that the students all made gains in terms of their problem-solving skills and ability to troubleshoot. With 37 students in each classroom, they had to learn to rely on each other to find another way to do something, or they would have been waiting a long time to get help. Most notably, the students made gains in terms of their critical literacy skills. They asked important and difficult questions about inequities and injustices. The elder that came in said that they asked better questions than his typical university audiences. And they became, as one teacher commented, more motivated by social activism as the result of this project.
And I think the social activism was also really important, because I think they're at an age where they're beginning to think about the world and things that are happening beyond themselves. So we have some social justice projects that we're working on. We're doing the tiles, the artistic tiles, that will be forever at a First Nations school. And we're also doing a volunteer committee that's raising money for the Hospital for Sick Children, so that we can raise money. It's just the students that are interested. It's a club. But we want to raise money for students, children, and families in our community. So I think students are more motivated by social activism as a result of this project.
For year 3 of the research, we'll be replicating this study in a different school and using tablets rather than laptops, and then conducting cross-case analyses to compare the results. Thank you.